the trauma freight train coming and knocking me to the ground, because until that moment in my life, I did what I was taught to do. I ran from all of the hurt. I pushed it down. I repressed it. When I say I ran away from it, I physically, geographically moved away from where the trauma happened. I hated being a mother because of the experiences that I had and what maternal figures represented to me. There's an expression that I heard when I was doing my life coaching certification, and it's that your biography becomes your biology.
This episode contains discussions of trauma, abuse, and other potentially sensitive topics that may be activating for some listeners. Please take care while listening and pause if you need to. Your well being is what matters most. Hi, Emily. Thank you so much for being here today. I was actually listening to a podcast with you the other day. You have faced a lot of traumatic events growing up. And it was actually through struggling to get pregnant and then your daughter being born that you started on the path to healing your trauma. That must have been really difficult being a new mom to a brand new baby while also working on yourself, on healing. Can you take us back to that time and share how you found the strength or even the time to work on yourself and what you found to be the most effective in your healing?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Yeah, so that time in my life, holy cow, I describe it as the trauma freight train coming and knocking me to the ground, because until that moment in my life, I did what I was taught to do. I ran from all of the hurt. I pushed it down. I repressed it. And like, when I say I ran away from it, I physically, geographically moved away from where the trauma happened, thinking that if I moved across the country, that I would get a fresh start, because no one would know my story. I could start anew and it wouldn't matter anymore. It's funny to me now, because that's not how it that's not how it works. Um
No.
but so in the journey of trying to conceive, I sat down with a naturopath who explained to me that the reasons why I was struggling to conceive was because of my stress response being stuck in the on position. So, in order to conceive, I had to nurture my body the way that it needed and replenish nutrients that were missing, because when you're stuck in a stress response, you don't digest your food properly.
Right.
And so you end up with vitamin and mineral deficiencies and hormonal imbalances and all kinds of things. So then my daughter arrived, and that trauma freight train hit me. And I remember sitting on my couch, and my daughter was asleep in her chair, her little bouncy swing thing. And I would just sit there and look at her and think, I've got to get out of here. This is not safe, because I do not want to hurt her the way that I was hurt as a child. And in my mind at that point, I thought that's what was going to happen. I was going to default into that role of unsafe mom that I had experienced, not just from one maternal figure, but from a handful of maternal figures. And I didn't want to do that. But I also knew that if I listened to that urge to run, I would be doing that. So
Right.
I had a decision to make. I could listen to that urge, which is a valid choice, My body was in fight or flight mostly. And I didn't know what I needed to do to heal at that particular moment. I knew that I didn't want to cause the same kind of hurt to my daughter that I had experienced. And I guess at that point, my husband would have been collateral damage because it really wasn't about him. It was about my daughter and I. And so I sat with that for a few months in silence because my trauma was telling me that if you tell people how you're feeling, they're going to leave you because you're a terrible person.
Mm.
And so at first, for a really long time, I hated being a mother. Hated it because of the experiences that I had and what maternal figures represented to me. And so it took me a long time to even open up to my husband. Like he knew there was something going on, but he didn't know what because I was very emotional. Um I would just cry and cry and cry and he didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
Until one day we the where we were living, we had to drive 45 minutes to get groceries. And so I believe it was a Saturday morning. The coffee shop that I really liked was in the town where we would go get groceries. And so to get out of the house, we packed up our daughter, got in the vehicle, drove to have breakfast or brunch at my favorite coffee shop. I got my favorite drink, a chocolate chip frap. It was delicious. And that I can't drink it anymore because it's got milk in it, but
I understand that struggle.
it was delicious. Anyway, and pick up a few groceries. And then on the way home, I was sitting in the passenger seat crying, looking out the window. And my husband was like, "What is wrong? Like, what is your problem? What is going on?" And I was like, okay, here it goes. I hate being a mother. Don't get me wrong. I love our daughter, but I hate being a mother.
Mm.
And in my mind, that's where he was going to explode and be like, "You're such a terrible person. You're awful. I can't believe that I'm married to you, blah, 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 blah." But that wasn't what happened at all.
Mm.
"Well, how do we fix this?" he says. And I was like, "I don't know. That's a great question. I do not have the answer." And that's where we started. From there, I spoke to a therapist via Zoom because we lived in a part of Alberta where mental health services weren't easily accessible. So I found a therapist who would do Zoom sessions, and she helped me to identify and establish where the boundaries were for where I started and stopped, where my biological mom stopped, and where my daughter started.
Mm.
Because for me, I was stuck in the thought loop that I am my mother. I am stuck making the same choices that she made. And my daughter is, and she's going to experience the same crap that I lived through. And I didn't know how to discern where the boundaries were. And so that therapist, we met a couple of times, and she really helped me to understand that my mom's choices were her choices. She did the best that she could, maybe. In the early 90s, I am me. I can make my own choices, and my daughter is going to live her own childhood. And and so that's where I started. And from there, I really worked on educating myself on what I needed to do. I searched high and low for mama mentors because at that point I didn't have a healthy mama relationship. And so I needed to learn a lot about motherhood, parent child relationships. And then it's just as my journey has evolved, it's become more about nurturing my nervous system. And this is a lot of the work that I do now with mamas is I help them to nurture their nervous system because I was triggered, hugely triggered for a lot of the first few years of my mamahood experience. And so it's been a lot about nurturing my nervous system, getting to know my nervous system, learning how to identify emotions because I was taught, like I said earlier, we don't feel, we just push it down and ignore it. So it's been a lot of rewriting and reparenting and all kinds of things.
Yeah. That moment of you having to say those words to your husband,
Uh-huh.
I hate being a mother, that must have been, like, I actually cannot even imagine how difficult and terrifying
Uh-huh.
that moment probably was. Thank you so much for sharing that story and being so vulnerable. Our main focus on today is going to actually be generational trauma. But I
Yeah.
wanted to have some background story here before we really get into it. So, what does generational trauma mean to you? And can you just help us better understand it?
So generational trauma is trauma that becomes part of your DNA, actually. There's an expression that I heard when I was doing my life coaching certification, and it's that your biography becomes your biology, meaning that as we go, if grandma has trauma that, or let's even go back even further, if great grandma has trauma, which she's human, she lived a human experience, she's got trauma, but she didn't work through it, then grandma inherits that.
Right.
And then if grandma doesn't work through it, then mom gets it. Mom
Mm.
inherits it. And
Right.
then if mom doesn't work through it, Junior gets it. Junior inherits it. So it's weaves itself into the genetic fabric of a family line. And it could be abuse and neglect, like I experienced. It can be cultural trauma, like the world wars or the depression or COVID. All of those things compact into intergenerational trauma. And it becomes part of your DNA, and your nervous system holds it. And something that I think is really interesting that I didn't know until recently is that when you're pregnant, if you're dealing with trauma or you are a trauma survivor and you haven't worked through your stuff that you've got to work through, and your body has a high cortisol level, which is your stress hormone, your baby can feel that cortisol coursing through your blood. And
Wow.
if it is extreme, that baby can be born with higher than normal cortisol levels. So their little nervous system, as soon as they come out, is already activated.
Wow.
That is how sensitive, how easily it goes from one generation to the other.
Yeah.
And I mean, then you parent, and your parenting is informed by trauma. So
Yeah.
it's it's profoundly impacting.
That actually reminds me back when you were sharing your story, I was gonna say, I feel like that feeling of being scared or nervous to become a parent, anybody who's gone through childhood trauma, I feel like that is a very normal response. It makes sense. Like you were terrified that you didn't want to be the
Yeah.
same person. You didn't want to pass that along. Good for you for doing that work and that healing.
Yeah, it's an ongoing journey, and it wasn't a walk in the park, but I would I wouldn't change anything.
What are some common signs that someone might be carrying generational trauma, especially if they grew up thinking their experiences were normal?
Yeah, that's that's pretty common. A lot of people associate traumatic childhood with the big T traumas, but trauma is simply undigested life events. And
Mhm.
it's the adaptation of your nervous system that, because your nervous system's main objective is survival. And
Yeah.
so it adapts to survive. So some of the common signs that you're carrying unprocessed trauma, your parenting, you are easily triggered by your kids. You have big, big reactions to their emotions. So for me, when my kids were little and crying and screaming was how they communicated, my nervous system couldn't handle that. So I would have, I wear a lot of hooded sweatshirts. I would put my hood up like this and then pull the drawstrings so that only my nose was sticking out. And I would curl up in a ball and I would rock to
Yeah.
soothe myself because I just couldn't handle it. If I could, I would also plug my ears.
Yeah.
So my eyes were covered. It was dark.
Yeah.
My ears, I could still hear, but it wasn't as sharp. And I was doing a motion to calm myself because I could not handle. That's how fragile my nervous system was when I became a mom. And I was a normal functional adult beforehand. So all kinds of things came up to the surface. And those emotional reactions that you have are not actually about your child. They are a time machine that takes you back to a time when you felt a particular way. So, an example from my own life, my son is a screamer. When he gets frustrated, he just screams. He's been that way since he was a baby. It's been very trying on my nervous system. But one day he was having a tantrum. He was frustrated about something, and I was trying to be the attentive mother and help him navigate that, but he wasn't being receptive. He was too dysregulated. And my nervous system got to the point where I just couldn't handle anymore. So, in a burst of frustration, I kicked a hole in my laundry room wall by accident. I was like, oops, I didn't think there was that much power behind my foot. Apparently, either the drywall is really weak or I am stronger than I think. And it wasn't until my my nervous system calmed down and I was able to reflect back on that situation and understand that my reaction wasn't actually about my son. It was about me, baby me, feeling unheard.
Wow.
But a lot of times we don't have the skills to ask ourselves the right questions to get to the root, or we're scared to get to the root. So we
Yeah.
stay on the surface, we stay in our head. I'm mad right now, it's your fault, and we blame someone for our reactions when it's really about us. And those triggers act as a time machine to take us back. And they're not the enemy, they're just a signal that you've got something to work through.
I think it would be really great if you could share some example questions that people could ask themselves if they find themselves in that situation.
Yeah, so I created some journal prompts that I include in my trigger toolkit. So I'll give you a little taster of what a couple of those journal prompts are.
Awesome. And then I will link that trigger toolkit for everybody.
Awesome. So the first one is when, insert what happened, I felt, insert what you felt. Maybe it's an emotion, maybe you felt angry, or maybe it's a sensation in your body.
Mm.
I felt the emotions rise up in my body. Where? Where in your body did you feel them? This time I tell me how you handled it, or journal how you handled it. Next time I would try what? What could you, and it's not about judging yourself. It's never about judging yourself, because judging yourself, shaming yourself isn't going to help you heal.
Yeah.
What's going to help you heal is increasing your level of awareness, because you can't heal or you can't change what you don't acknowledge.
Yes.
The fourth one that's here is this reminds me of a time when I felt this event was different because I can reclaim my voice by. Because so often as trauma survivors, we are the chronic people pleaser doormat, and we won't speak up because heaven forbid someone is mad at me for holding a boundary, because boundaries are selfish.
Those journal prompts are amazing. That story that you just shared about your
Yeah.
son screaming, could you walk us through how that would have worked for you in that situation?
Okay, so for example, the journal prompt, this time I, next time I would try. So this time I kicked a hole in the wall. Next time I would try breathing.
I think that's really powerful.
And it gives you a way of, you can journal a million and one ways. You don't have to use an old school notebook, although that's my preferred method of journaling. If you grew up in a home environment where using your voice was not safe, and if you were not in a place in your healing journey where using your voice feels safe yet,
Yeah.
journaling, writing it out somewhere, whether that's in a notebook, on an app on your phone where you can put a password on it, wherever, as long as you're getting it out and allowing that stress cycle to complete, you're not storing the trauma anymore because your body stores it. It remembers it. That's where the trigger comes from. But also, your triggers didn't become triggers overnight. And so they're not going to not be triggers overnight either. Because what you're doing is creating new pathways in your brain. And that takes time. So my story of my son that I shared, where he was screaming, I kicked a hole in the wall, and then I reflected back on it. That was one example from a ways into my personal journey. I was not in a place when my son was a baby or when my daughter was a baby to acknowledge a trigger and be like, oh, that's because I felt unheard like I did when I was a kid. It takes time. But then, probably 6 to 9 months later, my son would throw a temper tantrum and I could handle it without losing my cool. I mean, last week we were driving down the highway and he wanted to have his window down. It was 8 degrees outside. It was too cold to drive with the window down, going 80 kilometers an hour. I was like, bud, you got to put your window up. I wasn't mean about it. I just like, you got to put your window up. It's too cold. If you can't put your window up, mama's going to do it for you. And then I'm going to lock it so you can't put it back down because I don't want you to get sick.
Yeah.
So I followed through on that and I locked the window. Then what does he do? He starts kicking the window. I'm like, dude, don't do that because you could cut yourself. So another equally triggering experience, but I was aware of my nervous system enough to be able to handle it calmly. But Emily from 2 years ago would have lost her ever loving mind. It's a journey. And you may not even notice when the trigger is not a trigger anymore because it'll slip away like a thief in the night, and you'll be able to be more present with your kids. A lot of trauma survivors also struggle with different health issues. At the beginning of the episode, I talked about the infertility I experienced because of my stress response. I also deal with a lot of digestive issues because of my stress response. And it's collateral damage, right? Because when you're chronically low level stressed out for 25 to 30 years, it causes damage to your system. And we're still learning the impacts of trauma. And, if you're not impacted and then suddenly are, we're learning that that's also normal because trauma is weird that way.
Yes, it is. I feel like this is a great place to ask this question. So, in real everyday terms, what does the process of breaking a generational trauma cycle actually look like? I feel like you've talked a lot about it with the journaling, but I
Mhm.
was not sure if you can add on to that anymore.
Realistically, it looks like small, consistent choices to make new choices. Because so often we parent how we were parented. And if we don't like how we were parented and we want to create a new experience, it's about making consistent choices to make different choices.
Like that whole 1% better each day kind of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And, for at the beginning of my journey, I was like, this is really hard. because 95% of my family of origin didn't understand what I was doing. They certainly didn't like when I started sharing my story.
Mm.
And relationships suffered because of my choice to heal.
Yeah.
And some words were exchanged that weren't very nice. And I had to make the choice to prioritize my mental health and the mental health of my children over certain relationships that weren't healthy when I was a kid, let alone another generation of that. And so it's not an easy path. And there will be people who have the crab in a bucket mentality. I don't know if you've ever heard the analogy, but if you put a bunch of crabs in a bucket and one tries to escape, the other ones will pull him back down.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same kind of a thing when you've got a family member who is going on this healing journey, and it's not because you don't want better for them. It's because you feel threatened, because your dysfunction
Yeah.
is going to be exposed and it's threatening to you.
Yeah.
It has very little to do with the actual person who's doing the healing. It's more about you, but they'll tell you it's all about you. It's all your fault.
So, how can someone start setting boundaries or shifting dynamics in a family system without feeling like they're betraying their loved ones?
Well, for me, I had to really look at the types of behaviors that I was experiencing within the relationships that I had, and asking myself the hard questions. Is this type of behavior healthy? Is this the type of behavior that I want? Is this the way that I want someone to treat my children?
Mm.
Because if someone loves you, they will respect you.
Yeah.
And so for me, there were certain relationships where I had to prioritize, take my role as mama really seriously and prioritize my children over how someone else was going to perceive
Yeah.
the relationship. Like I had an on again, off again relationship with my mother. Whenever it was convenient for her, she would be around. And then something would happen and she would fall off the face of the earth. I didn't want that for my kids.
Yeah.
So for me, I just cut all ties. I didn't say anything. I just slipped away. She was in her bubble doing her thing. She was ignoring me. So I just cut ties. But sometimes when someone feels the need to give you advice that isn't helpful and isn't asked for,
Yeah.
and they're very pushy about it, boundaries are about protecting your mental health. So, what I've said is, we're not going to have this conversation right now. I'm not going to have this conversation right now. If you continue to speak to me in that way, I'm done. I'm out.
Mm-hmm.
And if they listen, great. If they get all in a tiffy and throw a fit like a toddler, then you know where they stand. And that fit is not because you're saying we're not having this conversation, it's because they are losing control. Even through the shaky voice, you are the only one who can advocate for you. You are the only one who can advocate for your children.
Yeah.
With that, then you have to follow through. The hard part, because if you don't, they're going to pick up on that and they're going to say, oh, she's all talk. She's not actually going to do it. She's all talk, and they're not going to believe you. But then when you do follow through, they get the point.
Yeah.
And sometimes, maybe a lot of times, they're not going to be happy that they got cut off. But it's not about punishing the other person. It's about protecting yourself and your children and your mental health, because you matter and your
Yeah.
children matter. And it's not about pleasing the other dysfunctional person. It's about healing, and you can't heal with that dysfunctional person in your circle.
I think that's a really important message to hear. Setting boundaries in general, whether you are a parent or not, but setting boundaries is about protecting yourself and or protecting somebody who you are in charge of taking care of.
And just because you've set that boundary doesn't mean that you have ill intent towards the other person. It doesn't mean that you hold a grudge. It doesn't mean that you're bad mouthing the other person. It is simply a line in the sand that says, I deserve to be treated with respect, with kindness, with love, and you're not doing that. So I need to remove myself from the situation and love you from a distance.
My next question kind of shifts a little bit. How do we hold empathy for those who passed on trauma while still honoring our need to heal and do things differently?
I love this question because it's something that I wrote about in my book Rising from the Ashes, because when we're kids, our perspective is so small. So small. Because we're kids and we don't have all of the information. We can't see the full picture. But when you're an adult and you're looking back and you can understand, okay, so this was going on and this was going on, and grandma and grandpa weren't the best parents either. So there's that. It's not about excusing the behavior, because those actions, whether they were their best or not, are still not okay. But understanding that where we're sitting right now in our mid 20s to wherever you're at in the circle of life, your parents were there too. And they didn't know what they were doing, just like you don't know what you're doing. They were figuring it out as they went along, just like you. And maybe they didn't have the tools, maybe they didn't have the awareness, maybe they didn't look for it. Maybe they did the best they could with what they had, maybe they didn't. But understanding that they're human too, and raising kids is hard, and you don't always know if you're making the right choice until 6 hours, 6 days, 6 months down the road. And not saying it doesn't matter, but lending them a bit of humanity,
Compassion.
compassion, because it's
Yeah.
hard,
Yeah.
especially if you don't understand what unhealed wounds you're carrying.
I remember the moment where I had healed enough where I was like, whoa, I'm seeing this all from a completely different perspective. And that they were literally just doing the best that they could do. And that is in a lot of cases that may not be the case. But yes, so I just want to clarify that. But for my mom, she did the best that she could do, the best that she knew how, 100%. And that's all that you can really ask for because nobody is perfect. So
Absolutely.
to be able to have the compassion when you can look back and see the whole picture. I love how you put that. What are some simple daily habits or mindset shifts that can support someone in reprogramming inherited patterns?
One that I do is journal. Get get the emotions out. Give yourself time to breathe. Acknowledge how you're feeling.
Mm.
Put your hand on your heart and say, "What do I need today?" And allowing whatever comes up to be okay.
Yeah.
If you need a day just to chill because your nervous system can't handle the people or the stimulation, find a way to accommodate that. Another thing that I've done is supplementation. So when your nervous system is stuck in the stress state, you develop vitamin and mineral deficiencies, which then lend themselves to a whole bunch of health issues and can make worse nervous system dysregulation.
Right.
So I've used adaptogenic herbs like ashwagandha
Yeah.
to help nurture my nervous system, especially in those early days when my nervous system was like off the charts.
Hmm.
It would help me come down and be able to function without a rock on my chest. Uh, Self care, and I know for moms especially, this is really, really hard, but it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be a long time. It can be 3 minutes in the bathroom breathing while you brush your hair or brush your teeth. It could be praying before going to bed or when you get up in the morning. It could be if you have a if you are a person of faith, reading your Bible. It could be creating a routine that nurtures your nervous system instead of strangling it and just powering through. It was hard because that's our culture.
Our default mode.
Yeah, that's our culture. Your hustle is your worth, but that's not true.
I feel like, again, in general, whether you're a parent or not a parent, becoming aware of what you're feeling and tuning into your body and really noticing when things are coming up, that and learning how to breathe through it. Those two things were life-changing for me.
Yeah, learning how to breathe. It sounds so simple because we do it every second of the day to stay alive. But as trauma survivors, we breathe very shallow. Like we're not getting deep into our lungs, which robs us of the healing power of your breath. I remember when I first started learning how to do mindful breathing, I felt like I was being suffocated. I was like, man, this is hard work. With practice, you get the benefits out of it. And you're able to hack your nervous system into calm.
Yes.
It's amazing.
Amazing. If you could leave our listeners with one empowering message about healing and generational change, what would it be?
Being the cycle breaker isn't an easy path to walk,
Mm.
but the change and the work that you put into breaking those cycles will ripple through generations to come. You are doing the work that your ancestors didn't know was needed, and the work that those who come after you will be so thankful that you did.
I love that message that you're not just doing it for yourself or the people
Mhm.
who are in your immediate life, but also for the people who come after you. That's amazing. So, to wrap this up, we have some rapid fire questions. Okay, are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay, let's do it. What would you tell your younger self in one sentence?
You're more powerful than you know.
Ooh, oh, that's good. What is your go-to hype song when you need a confidence boost?
Oh boy. Well, I really love the song How He Loves by David Crowder. It's an oldie. It's one of his originals, but it's all about God's love, and if I've got him, I'm good.
Okay, awesome. Do you have a mantra or affirmation you say to yourself often?
I don't.
Okay. I'm actually surprised you are the second person who has said that they don't have one. I'm like, I have like 10. Okay, last one. What does life after trauma mean to you in one word?
Rising.
Oh, love that. Emily, this has been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for your time and for being here. Can you share all of your things, like how people can come and connect with you? And I will be sure to link everything, but if you want to talk about it.
Yeah. So if you wanna connect with me, you can find me on Instagram, emily.mamahoodaftertrauma. If you would like a free resource, I have an unlocking peace guide. It's a survival guide for overwhelmed mamas who are looking to move out of reactivity and build connected, peaceful relationships with their littles. So inside there, you've got different trigger tools that you can use to find calm. If you would like more resources for trigger management, I do have actual physical trigger toolkits. They're small enough to fit in your purse, your car, your diaper bag, and they come with a bunch of different tools in there. You can find that on my website, mamahoodaftertrauma.ca. And I will send you a coupon code for your
Oh, okay.
audience to save a little bit if they choose to order a trigger toolkit.
That sounds great. Well, thank you again so much, Emily. This has been really awesome. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Of course.